Heinz Linge was born in Bremen, Germany, on March 23, 1913. In his younger years, he was employed as a bricklayer before joining the SS in 1933. He served in their Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Hitler's bodyguard regiment. In 1934, when he was part of the No. 1 Guard to Hitler's residence on the Obersalzberg, near Berchtesgaden, he was selected to serve at the Reich Chancellery. By 1945, he had reached the rank of SS Lieutenant Colonel. On January 24, 1935, Linge was chosen to be a valet for Hitler, being one of only 3 valets at time. In September 1939, he replaced SS Colonel Karl Wilhelm Krause as chief valet for Hitler. He worked as a valet in the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, at Hitler's residence near Berchtesgaden, and at Hitler's Wolfslair headquarters in what was then East Prussia. He later said his daily routine was to wake Hitler each day at 11 a.m., and give him his morning newspapers and messages. Hitler would reportedly dress himself to a stopwatch with Linge being there, referee. He would take a light breakfast of tea, biscuits and an apple and a vegetarian lunch at 2:30 p.m., and dinner with a small number of guests present at 8 p.m. As Hitler's valet, Heinz Linge was also a member of the Führerbunker, which provided personal security protection for Hitler. By 1944, he was also head of Hitler's personal service staff, and as well as accompanying Hitler on all his travels, he was responsible for the accommodation, the servants, mess orderlies, cooks, caterers and maids, all reported to Linge. He was among the soldiers, servants, secretaries, and officers who moved into the Reich Chancellery in Führerbunker in Berlin in January 1945. He continued as Hitler's chief valet and protocol officer, and was one of those who was present during the last days of Hitler's life during the Battle of Berlin, delivering messages to Hitler and escorting people in to meet with him. In addition, after Hitler's personal physician, Theodor Morell, left Berlin on April 23, 1945, Heinz Linge and Dr. Werner Haas administered to Hitler the prepared medicine that Morell had left behind. 2 days before committing suicide, Hitler told Linge his plan. He also asked Linge to have their bodies wrapped in blankets and taken up to the Reich Chancellery garden to be cremated. Linge claimed that, following his marriage to Eva Braun, Hitler spent the last night of his life lying awake and fully clothed on his bed, staring at the ceiling. On Monday, April 30, 1945, Hitler had a final midday meal with his secretaries. After the meal, Linge spoke briefly with Eva Braun. He described her as looking pale and tired. She thanked him for his service. Hitler then said farewell to each of his servants and subordinates. Afterwards, Hitler left for his study at 3:15 p.m. Around this time, Linge privately asked Hitler for his orders. Hitler said that he was going to shoot himself and Linge knew what he had to do. He reportedly said, "You must never allow my corpse to fall into the hands of the Russians. They would make a spectacle in Moscow out of my body and put it in waxworks." Hitler had also given the order to break out of the Soviet encirclement, Linge join one of the groups and try to get to the Western Allied lines. In a 1974 episode of The World at War, Heinz Linge and Hitler's secretary, Traudl Junge, described Hitler's final minutes in the bunker. Linge explains that Hitler and his wife committed suicide in Hitler's private room in the bunker. He recalled how he went into Hitler's private study after hearing a sudden bang and found that Hitler and Eva Braun were dead. Hitler had shot himself in the right temple, and Braun had taken what Linge concluded must have been cyanide poison. After the suicides, their corpses were reportedly carried up the stairs to ground level and through the bunker's emergency exit to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, where they were doused with petrol. After the first attempts to ignite the petrol did not work, Linge went back inside the bunker and returned with a thick roll of papers. Martin Bormann lit the papers and threw them onto the bodies. As the corpses caught fire, A small group, including Bormann, Linge, Otto Gunscher, Joseph Goebbels, Erich Kempka, Peter Hogel, Ewald Lidloff, and Hans Riese, raised their arms in salute as they stood just inside the bunker doorway. At around 4:15 p.m. that day, Linge ordered SS Untersturmführer Heinz Kruger and SS Oberscharführer Werner Schwedel to roll up the rug in Hitler's study and burn it. They carried it up the stairs and outside to the Chancellery Garden, where it was burned. Throughout the afternoon, the Soviets shelled the area in and around the Reich Chancellery. SS guards brought over additional cans of petrol to further burn the corpses. Linge later wrote that he burned other personal possessions of Hitler's while another SS bodyguard oversaw the burial of the burnt bodies in a shell crater. Heinz Linge was one of the last to leave the Führerbunker in the early hours of Tuesday, May 1, 1945. He teamed up with Erich Kempka. He was later captured by the Red Army near the Seestrasse in Berlin. After his identity was revealed, 2 Soviet officers took him by train to Moscow, where he was then held in the infamous Lubyanka prison. He then spent 10 years in Soviet captivity, before being released, in 1955. During his imprisonment, both he and Otto Gunscher were interrogated by the Soviet People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs about the details and circumstances of Hitler's death. A dossier was edited by Soviet NKVD officers and sent to Joseph Stalin on December 30, 1949. The report was published in 2005 as the Hitler Book. Heinz Linge died in Hamburg, in West Germany on March 9, 1980, at the age of 66. His memoir, With Hitler to the End, was published by Frontline Books, Skyhorse Publishing, Incorporated of London in July 2009, with an introduction by historian Roger Morehouse, author of the book, Killing Hitler.